Today what we're going to do is we're going to take 4 points, and we're actually going to say if it's a parallelogram, a rectangle, a rhombus, or a square. Now, in the past, we've been given 4 points and we've been saying, yes, this is a parallelogram, and no, it's not, based on the slopes of those 4 points. What we're doing is the exact same thing, but we're just going to add one more step. So the first thing we need to do is draw our image of our shape. You can draw it like a parallelogram. You can draw it like a rectangle or square. It does not matter. Okay, so make sure you label A, B, C, or D, or whatever points that you're given. And we need to make sure, and we need to find slopes of AB and DC, okay, because we have to double check that they're at least parallel. And we have to find slopes of AD and BC. So just like before, we find our slopes. The point A is 4, 3, B is 2, 6. Okay, so from 4 to 2 is minus 2. From 3 to 6 is plus 3. So the slope of AB is 3 over negative 2. For DC, we find D is 10, 7. C is 8, 10. So from 10 to 8 is minus 2. From 7 to 10 is plus 3. So again, the slope is 3 over negative 2, which means that these two lines are parallel. Okay, they have the same slope, which means they're parallel. We need to do that the same thing for AD and BC. So A is, again, 4, 3. D is 10, 7. So to get from 4 to 10, you add 6. From 3 to 7, you add 4. So your slope is 4 sixths, or simplified is 2/3. And same thing here, BC. B is 2, 6. C is 8, 10. To get from 2 to 8, you add 6. 6 to 10 is add 4. So again, 4 over 6, or simplified, is 2/3. Always make sure you're simplifying your slopes because they do matter at this point. Because the first thing we have to do is see if our sides are perpendicular. And perpendicular slopes are opposite, reciprocal. Opposite reciprocal, which means if we look at AB, that's 3 over negative 2, and we look at AD, which is 2/3, one of these two numbers has to be positive, okay, and one of them has to be negative, and the fractions need to be flipped. So since 3 is on the top, 3 need to be on the bottom. Since 2 is on the bottom, 2 needs to be on the top. So because these two slopes are opposite reciprocal, we can say that they form right angles. Okay, now there is a chart that you need to know, and this chart looks something like this. Okay, so on the back of your sheet, go ahead and copy this down. It's kind of like a flow chart. Okay, so we start with our shape. We don't know what it is, but we've labeled our corners. The first step is to look at the sides. Do your sides have perpendicular slopes, or do your sides do not have perpendicular slopes? Our first example, they have perpendicular slopes. So right now, we have narrowed our shape down to either a square or a rectangle because those four corners are 90 degrees. They're right angles. They cannot be rhombus or parallelogram. Okay, so let's go back to our problem. In order to figure out if this is a square or a rectangle, we have to see what our diagonals do. The two diagonals in this shape are AC and BD. So we need to find the slope of AC and BD. Now, if you remember back to yesterday, we talked about the slopes of squares and the slopes of rectangles and their diagonals. If it is a square, then they intersect to form right angles. If it is a rectangle, then it intersects to form not right angles. Okay, so let's find the slopes of these two diagonals. So AC is set up here. From 4 to 8, you add 4. From 3 to 10, you add 7, so 7/4 is your slope. So if we look at BD, B is 2, 6, D is 10, 7. To get from 2 to 10, you add 8. To get from 6 to 7, you add 1, so 1/8. If you look at these two slopes, they are not perpendicular. So if we go back to our chart, we said our sides had perpendicular slopes because they were opposite reciprocal, but our diagonals do not have perpendicular slopes. Therefore, the shape that we have is a rectangle. So this is a rectangle. So that's what we're going to be doing again. So take a look at the next example. So here again, we're going to draw our image. So you have O, P, Q, R. So again, we need to find our slopes of O and P, R and Q, and we need to find OR and PQ. So the slope of OP would be 4, 7, 9, 7. 4 to 9 is plus 5. 7 to 7 is plus 0. So our slope is 0 over 5, or just 0. RQ, R is 1, 3. Q is 6, 3. 1 to 6 is plus 5. 3 to 3 is plus 0, or 0 over 5, which is 0. They are parallel. OR, O is 4, 7. R is 1, 3. So 4 to 1 is minus 3. 7 to 3 is minus 4. So this is negative 4 over negative 3, which is 4/3. PQ, P is 9, 7. Q is 6, 3. To get from 9 to 6, you minus 3. 7 to 3, you minus 4. So negative 4 over negative 3 is 4/3. So looking at these two slopes, 0 and 4/3, are those opposite reciprocal? So we can see that these are not perpendicular, which if we go back to our image here, we started off with 4 points, but this time our sides do not have perpendicular slopes. So we cannot have a square or a rectangle, okay, because they do not add up to 90, or they are not 90 degrees. So in this case, we have a rhombus or a parallelogram. Okay, so let's go back and look at our diagonals. So our diagonals here are R, P, and O, Q. Okay, so again, we have to have opposite reciprocal for them to be perpendicular. So O is 4, 7. Q is 6, 3. To get from 4 to 6, you add 2. 7 to 3, you subtract 4, so negative 4 over 2, or negative 2. RP, R is 1, 3. P is 9, 7. To get from 1 to 9, you add 8. From 3 to 7, you add 4, or 4 over 8, or 1/2. Negative 2 can also be known as negative 2 over 1, and 1/2 are opposite reciprocal. So these slopes are perpendicular. So again, let's go back to our flow chart. We said in this shape, our sides do not have perpendicular slopes, but our diagonals have perpendicular slopes. So this shape is a rhombus. So let's say rhombus. So I want you to take a second, try this last example, and write down what you get. I'm going to pause the computer, so as soon as if you keep it playing, it's going to continue to go.